The Celtics snap a 4-game win streak with a 114-110 loss to the Denver Nuggets. Jaylen Brown still puts up 33, but doesn't have one of his better games of the season. We'll talk about what went wrong and what went right, all that in just a moment.
Jaylen Brown with the flush. Tatum the drive. Tatum the finish. It is banner 18. The mission commanded is mission accomplished.
Entering tonight, the Celtics had won 13 of 16 games, and they were playing a Denver Nuggets team that on paper they should have beat because Nikola Jokic was out, and obviously he is so critical to what this team does offensively and what's actually allowed the Nuggets to have the best offense from an efficiency standpoint in NBA history. And if you follow those numbers, the Celtics actually have the second best, the 26 Celtics. So they're somewhat inflated numbers, but this was a fun matchup. Everybody knew it was going to be national game, tons of buzz at TD Garden, and as much as you might think, okay, no Jokic, no problem, this is a Denver Nuggets team and organization that kind of mirrors the Celtics to me in a lot of ways, in the sense that even if your heliocentric star is out, other guys are going to step up. They're well coached, they're well prepared, and you could sense that there was guys on this team that felt ready to step up and make the most of an opportunity that's now opened up with Jokic out of the lineup. And Peyton Watson, for example, explodes for 30 points on 10 of 15 shooting, and he really makes the Celtics pay. Jamal Murray had 22 points and 17 assists and just 2 turnovers. He's a guy that feels capable of being a number one option. He said it today in an interview on Anscape that he feels like he could be an MVP in this league, right? So I think kind of similarly to how we've seen all season long with Jason Tatum, where with him sidelined, Celtics players have stepped up to the plate. Jaylen Brown making an MVP campaign, other players on the roster stepping up, and Queta now is a starting center. Like with everything that's happened in the offseason, I sensed a little bit from Denver that they have this similar like fighting, resilient energy, and they seem to have a really good coach in David Adelman. So first thing I'll say is I don't do this that often, but hats off to the Denver Nuggets for a really well-played game. I thought they executed really well. The Celtics put a ton of pressure on Jamal Murray in the pick and roll, and he made right read after right read after right read, and his teammates hit open threes, and then the Nuggets hit 20 threes in this game, shot almost 45% from three. So this is the kind of game, it's not that it's not that the ball wasn't in Boston's court, but sometimes another team just outplays you, and I did feel like this Denver game was one you'll live with. Like, you'll live with this loss because they were well coached, they were well played, and yes, on paper, like no Jokic feels like a game you should have. They've been mostly winning those kinds of games. So I guess my big picture primary takeaway is that you'll live with this loss. Looking at individual performances, Jaylen Brown had kind of a weird game. He took 29 shots, turned the ball over 7 times, and he finishes this one with 33 points and 4 assists. And on paper, not a bad stat line for him. He found ways to score the ball, even though I didn't feel like it was really his night. But after the game, he talked about the officiating and how he felt like he wasn't getting the calls that he's been getting as of late. And so shots that should have been free throws ended up being, transition opportunities for the Denver Nuggets. And so I actually did feel that being in the building, that Jaylen just wasn't getting the same whistle that he's gotten in recent days. And to be honest with you, I think his whistle's been pretty fair for the last few weeks after starting off pretty rough. So it's just a part of the game. And I think he said he has to be better at adjusting, and he let it get into his head in this game. And I felt like there were moments where he was driving to the basket kind of in spite of the lack of call, almost daring the official to once again let them get away with contact. And so tonight it didn't pan out, and I like his aggression. I think that it's done wonders for this team. And so I guess the bright side, since this podcast I generally pull out positive takeaways from these games, is that even on a night where he wasn't getting calls and I felt like he was just really struggling to hit some shots that he normally makes, and the Nuggets defended him really well, he still drops 33 and 4. And I feel like that's the kind of stat line that now, you look at the best players in the league, like you find ways to put up points. And I did not think this was a great Jaylen Brown game. It was probably bottom 5 performance for him on the season. But that in and of itself shows you just how consistent he's been this year, that he's just found ways to put the ball in the basket regardless. I didn't think that the offensive issues really disrupted his ability to rebound or defend. I think he was engaged in other aspects of the game, but they lose by 4 in this one, and you look at his stat line, all they needed was a couple more plays, and then we're talking about how he pulled out 33 points on a night where he just didn't have it, and the officials didn't really have it for him either. So that's number one. Number two, I'll talk about Anfernee Simons, who averaged about 17 points per game on that West Coast road trip and has earned the praise of Joe Mazzulla, and obviously comes in, Monday night here at TD Garden on a night where a lot of the Celtics players just did not have it against the Bulls. He scored a season-high 27 points, and all of which came in the second half. And so there's been a lot of Anfernee Simons buzz, and the thing that I'll say about Anfernee is that he hits timely baskets. There's no stat for it. The only way I can reach that conclusion is just by watching this team and watching these games. And every time they need one, he delivers. He really does. And in this game, he was, I think, 6 of 9 from the field is what he finished with. And honestly, they were all big-time baskets. He hits 2 threes to close the third quarter that gave them a lead entering the fourth. Like, they don't win this game, so it's not going to make the headlines. But part of what I get to do on this podcast is talk about the performances that we would be gushing about had they pulled off the victory. And Anfernee's at the top of the list. So this is a guy that early on I was skeptical about his addition to this team, primarily because of his deficiencies on the defensive end. I mean, statistically speaking, last year he was one of the worst high-volume defenders in the league with most analytics that you might look at. And I thought early this season, even when he had heaters like the Orlando Magic game where he has that crazy, was it a first half or second half in Orlando? And Joe doesn't really play him extended minutes. When I went back and rewatched that game, he was hurting them so much on the defensive end that as much as he was helping them on the offensive end, defensively it was almost counteracting. So the thing with Anfernee, where I'm at with him right now, is that he has made such strides in the defensive end that he is somebody that now you can really benefit from his offensive skill set. And I thought tonight, if anything, I would have liked to see him play a little bit more. I think he had such a flow to his offense that maybe would have benefited them a little bit down the stretch in that fourth quarter. But I'm not really in the business of nitpicking Joe's lineup decisions because he's shown to be incredibly crafty with who he plays and when he plays those players. And so far he's been hitting all the right buttons, which is why this team has been so successful and it exceeded everybody's expectations. But I will just say I'm continuing to keep my eye on Anfernee Simons as a contributor for this team and not as a trade piece, because I think over the summer, entering the beginning of this year, everybody viewed him as a $28 million expiring contract. And can they get rid of it? Can they attach a pick to that contract and offload it? I don't think he's a negative asset at all. Negative asset being someone that you have to attach a pick to get rid of that contract. I don't think that he's in that camp. And if he's perceived as that around the league, then they shouldn't trade him. Because again, this was another game, and it feels like it's every night now that he comes in and makes the most of his minutes. And I like that trio of him, Luka Garza, and Ugo playing together. So the results weren't necessarily there for the team that they would have liked, but it continued to kind of point me in the direction of this guy actually being a valuable asset for the Celtics long term. I want to give a quick shout out to our friends over at PrizePicks. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Whether you're starting a new routine or making player picks for the first time, trying something new could be hard, but in life and on PrizePicks, it always feels good to be right. With high-pressure playoff matchups every weekend and elite hoop action almost every night, the action never stops, and PrizePicks lets you take control. Missing your fantasy team? My league is already over, but with PrizePicks, I don't have to wait until next year's draft to keep playing fantasy. PrizePicks lets you play fantasy football every week, even in the playoffs. Pick your favorite players and win when they hit their projections every week. No draft requires. PrizePicks puts their users first, so all withdrawals are fast and secure. PrizePicks accepts most major payment methods, making deposits into your account quick and easy this sports season. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. The other one I wanted to mention was Peyton Pritchard and that bench unit that kind of brought the game back. Peyton did not have a great game for most of this one. Neither did Derek. I felt like offensively they needed a little bit more from the both of them. But with the Celtics down by double digits with a few minutes to spare, Joe Mazzulla goes to this kind of switch everything lineup with Jordan Walsh playing the 5 and Baylor Shireman's out there and Ugo's out there. And Peyton was really spearheading the charge. And he gets fouled on a 3-point attempt. He has an and one layup. And I like the fact that even though the game was pretty much over, suddenly they cut it to now they're down by 3 with 6 seconds to spare. And it would have been one of the most improbable comebacks you'll ever see because they were down by double digits with just a minute there. But that group stuck with it and they forced turnovers and they stayed aggressive and they drew fouls. And a lot of people here, this is a great crowd here at TD Garden, I'll just give them a shout out as well, but a lot of people had started pouring out and the people that stayed were captivated, right? Because suddenly this was a close game. And so that stuff matters to me. It might sound kind of goofy to say oh, we should be happy that the bench, an all bench lineup, that the game was already out of reach and Joe Mazzulla kind of waved the white flag. They didn't just give up and they actually fought to make it a real game. it does matter that that group has that ability to turn it on. And this is not the first time we've seen that in the Joe Mazzulla era, where he puts out an all-bench lineup with just a few minutes to spare. But tonight especially, you could tell that Payton felt the responsibility to kind of head that snake, and then everybody else, Jordan, Baylor, Ugo, those guys that have been those like energy guys, came in and did their part. And listen, they were just a couple plays off. I go back to, there was an offensive rebound at the end of the second quarter that they led up, Jamal Murray missed the three, or Aaron Gordon missed the three, and then it led to a Jamal Murray three that surely gave him confidence entering halftime. Those are the kinds of plays that lose you basketball games, because, hey, they were down by 3 with 6 seconds to spare. That would have been a tie game. And so credit to that group for kind of continuing to fight. I do think that stuff carries over into the next game. So if I now see Baylor or Jordan kind of playing more extended minutes next game, I think that stint has ramifications, both from Joe's standpoint of like, okay, I'm impressed with what I saw, but also from the standpoint of being one of those guys and feeling confident, like your impact in winning. And then I don't think Queta had like the best game. He missed some bunnies. I feel like he could have been more involved at times, but you got to give him a shout out. 20 rebounds for him. It's the first time since 2015 that a Celtics player has gotten 20 rebounds. Jared Sullinger did it in 2015, I should say. And so Queta, there's been a lot of talk around his game. He's established himself as a legitimate starting center for the Celtics team. He's had a lot of good moments. He had some really just like battling out there moments that honestly didn't always result in baskets, and so they're going to be overlooked, but the fight was there. The bench was going crazy for a couple of the putbacks that he had, and I think he just showed, I think he sees like Luka Garza comes in and crashes the offensive glass, and you saw more of that from him tonight. 10 offensive rebounds for him in this game, and so they capitalize on the fact that the Celtics, the Nuggets didn't have a conventional center out there at all times. Certainly wasn't like, if Jokic is out there, he's a great rebounder, so that helps, that would have made it harder, but I like that we're continuing to see that kind of energy from Queta, and he's become a very prolific rebounder. And, earlier in the season, all the discussion was around this team's defensive rebounding woes. Like, remember, we used to talk about that every single game, and I thought that this whole season was going to be just talking about defensive rebounding and how boring was that going to be. And that's not really been a dominant discussion topic around this team anymore, because while they're still not a great defensive rebounding team, they've managed to be fine when you look at total rebounds because of how they've been really good to, top 7 for the most of the season on the offensive glass. And Queta has been very much a big part of that. And so shout out to him for 20 rebounds, especially doing it in sub 30 minutes doesn't happen very often. This is the kind of loss that big picture, we talked to some of the guys about it post game, Peyton Pritchard, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Joe Mazzulla. You can check out the entire press conferences on CLNS Media as always. But I think everybody just felt like, listen, the Nuggets executed. You go back and watch some of that pick and roll coverage on the Celtics front. Jaylen said the defense was fine. I felt like they were a little over-aggressive at times, but hey, that's been their MO on the defensive end. When I rewatch, maybe I'll have a stronger opinion, but for the most part, if you double and the player makes the right read every single time, which Jamal Murray really did, and then the Nuggets are going to hit 50% of their threes off those reads, like, you're just not going to win. And in a 7-game series, it won't happen 7 times, but tonight it happened. I think it was a good win for the Denver Nuggets, who finished off a 7-game road trip with another resilient win here. You have to respect it from a basketball standpoint, what they've been able to do with losing like the heart and soul of their team. But from the Celtics standpoint, I think this is the kind of game that you get in the film room and you really look down at like, what were the breakdowns? What were the moments where the wrong read was made? Like, this was not an effort loss. They didn't come out flat. I don't think it was one of those losses like the Utah game or the Brooklyn game where you're just sitting there being like, they just didn't bring it and that's unacceptable. Everybody seemed to accept, like, this is what happens when you're a good team battling good opponents night in and night out. You can't win them all. And this was one of those games. So you can check out their thoughts, Derek, Peyton, Jaylen, and Joe. Check out all of our post-game coverage. We had a full hour-and-a-half long Garden report with our full cast, so check that out as well. And we'll have more coverage here. This is not my last time at TD Garden this week. Friday night, Celtics host the Raptors, and Saturday night they host Luke Cornett and the Spurs, so we'll have more coverage from right here at TD Garden. More You Got Boston's coming up, and thank you as always for watching.